Guys, what's the craziest thing that's happened in the boys' locker room that most girls wouldn't understand? Someone in my older brother's class stuck a matchbook on my brother's back right above his belt and lit it on fire as a prank. I guess my brother got a pretty serious burn at the base of his back, about the size of an apple. He didn't tell anyone about it because he wasn't a snitch. But as he was getting ready for practice after school in the locker room, his coach saw it and assumed my brother was being abused. My brother not admitting how it happened made everyone at the school assume the worst. My parents got called in, and when the teachers threatened to call the police on my dad, my brother finally told them what happened. The kid who did it was going to get expelled for, setting someone on fire, but my dad was an education is the most important thing in the world kind of guy and went to bat for the kid. I think the kid ended up with 3 years of detention, but he did get to stay in the school. People who were fine 1 minute, then woke up in the hospital. What happened? My dad was driving me to school, and suddenly I was in my bed. I get up, open my door, and ask my family what just happened. They all simultaneously screamed for me to go back to the bed. Apparently, I had already asked them what happened 6 separate times. I had a series of grand mal seizures during the car ride, went from chatty to seizing all of a sudden. My dad called our pediatrician, and I was eventually diagnosed with a form of epilepsy. My dad was told to take me home and put me to bed. It was the most disorienting thing I've ever experienced. It took 6 months to feel normal again. I had a constant sense of newness with familiar things that was very weird. I was in elementary school. I stayed home because I had a light fever. One day I took a nap and woke up 3 days later in the hospital with no feeling in my legs. I had contracted viral meningitis, which had cut off the nerves to my lower body. I was bedridden for 3 weeks and spent several more weeks in physical therapy learning how to walk. The horrors I endured during my stay were traumatic enough, but I still feel lucky. Reddit, what is your most cringe story about someone who has a crush on you? I managed a cafe that was located about an hour's drive from my house. There was this guy who had it really bad for me. He came in a couple of times a day and refused to be served by any of my staff, just me. Anyway, as if that wasn't bad enough, one day during the winter, it got very icy, so I decided to not drive home but stay in a band instead for safety. And don't ask me how, but he found out and stayed in the same band. I was woken up by him banging on my door. When I opened it, he stood there, fuming about how I don't trust him, or why else would I lock the door to my room during the night? Now, who doesn't lock the door in a band? Also, well though, guess what? He obviously tried the door. What? Also, by the time I made it to work the next morning, a 2-minute walk from the band, he had already managed to tell a good portion of the townies we had spent the night together. This guy actually scared the crap out of me. I regularly passed up other people working on the same street to not have to walk to the parking lot. Therapists that have cried in a session. Why? Had a sweet little boy tell me about the death of his dad, who was his little league coach. Tragically, he died the week of the big championship game. He went ahead and played the game the day before the funeral. He hit a home run and shared tearfully how the next day he put the baseball in his dad's coffin at the funeral with his team all standing around him in support. Therapist here. I've gotten misty-eyed a number of times, but only outright had tears for once. My client was very vividly describing the week her newborn daughter spent in the NICU, ending with the day that they knew she would pass. She told me what it was like to hold her baby as she died in her arms. The feeling of grief that filled the air was just too much for me to hold in, so of course a few quiet tears rolled out of my eyes. Client who lost her husband, talking about how due to a miscommunication at the hospital, she thought she'd have time to say goodbye before he passed away. Taken off ventilator, but when she came back into the room, he had died and she wasn't there for him dying. Everyone got to say goodbye except her. She loved him so much and it totally broke my heart. All of her story was so sad, so this was icing on the cake, really. What is the most infuriating case of double standards you've come across? When I changed the primary number to my husband's number, they were confused that he picked up and asked him to verify my number for future reference. They never bother or ask or complain to my husband, only me, the mum. I've heard many stories about men getting judged, shamed, bullied, and abused for going into genderless parent rooms to change their kid, as if they aren't allowed to provide a basic need for their child, and a space meant for both men and women. When my wife puts anything anywhere, it is the place of the thing. If I put anything anywhere, why do I not clean up after myself? My brother can stay overnight at his girlfriend's house for a week, but when I hang out at my boyfriend's house the whole day for 3 days straight, he works far away, and he rarely comes home. My mum gets super mad. I don't even attempt to stay overnight. Obviously, I'm a girl. What's the best roast you heard someone say in school? There was a special needs kid in my class, no clue what he had exactly, but guessing some autism. My class was small, and no one bothered him, kind of a dick move to bully a challenged kid. That is, except for one girl in my class. She thought she was hot, and granted, she was pretty and came from money. She had an own habit of inviting less attractive classmates to take pictures with her so she could look more attractive in social media posts. And yes, she directly said this to several people. Anyhow, she bragged about how she was going to ask the special kid to prom. make herself look like a nice person, and everyone thought it was really, but no one really did anything about it. When she asked the kid in a public scene, this kid turned and flatly said, "No thank you, you're A." I'm not a big fan of saying stuff like that, but it was hilarious, and for once in her life, she seemed mortified. What's the best thing you weren't supposed to overhear? I was in a cafe in Versailles where I had been studying for about half a year. I was speaking in English to my father, who was visiting for just 2 days. We were perceived to be typical stupid American tourists. We are American but not dumb, and we weren't tourists, at least not that day. I overheard a group of teenage boys talking about how dumb and easy American girls were, that we always put out because we're a bunch of dumb cows who can't get enough attention. These guys were jerks, not like the average nice folks I was meeting at school and work. They were going on and on for at least half an hour about American girls and what my body probably looked like in painfully descriptive detail. All in a very lovely discussion. They were idiots, were arguing over who could get my phone number first. One approached me in English. He said, "I can't help but notice that such a lovely young American might need a native French tour guide. I'd love to show you around the neighborhood nice and loud in French." I said, "Plenty of us aren't easy or stupid. Go after yourself." My dad, who didn't understand the exchange but could tell what happened, at least vaguely, said, "I've never been more proud of you." As a flight attendant, what is the saddest thing you've been asked by a passenger? Grandma brought a little girl of about 6, sent into the gate to fly out as an unaccompanied minor. I went to walk her down. She started all out sobbing, "Please, Grandma, I'm so scared to fly. Please drive me." Grandma was in tears too, but kisses her goodbye, and off we go down the jetway. I was attempting to calm her down a little and told her flying is very safe. Then she told me my daddy died in a plane crash 3 weeks ago. I couldn't believe that anyone would force this little child to fly so soon, much less all by herself. Do you think they might have let the ground crew know so we could prepare the flight crew? As I was about 8 months pregnant at the time, I was pretty much a hormonal wreck too. She asked me to sit with her, and I told her I couldn't go with her, but I would stay until it was time to close the airplane door. It was a tough 20 minutes, but when I handed her off to the flight attendant, she was fairly calm, was coloring a picture. She gave it to me before I left. It's been more than 25 years, and I still have the picture. As a teenager, what was the worst thing your parents ever walked in on you doing? Oh God, time to tell this story. So basically, my girlfriend at the time and I were home alone and started watching a movie. We got to the part of the movie where both of our shirts are off and her pants are down around her ankles when suddenly we hear a car pull up in the driveway. We were on the couch in my TV room, which is pretty much right off the main entrance. Shirts get back on just in time, but with my entire family crashing into the room, the pants are still firmly south of the border. Fortunately, we're both still under a blanket with a movie on. Somewhat less fortunately, we're watching some Disney movie, so everyone is sticking around. The lights are off, so it's not super obvious just how guilty we look. And while everyone is distracted, we pretend to be looking at something on my phone while typing out a plan to each other. Plan initiated, I drop my phone and in the process of retrieving it, grab her pants and bring them up to her knees. She then stretches out, letting me pull pants up to about mid-thigh level. So far, so good. Now for the hard part. We wait about 5 minutes for a big song, so everyone is distracted looking.